Hi, I'm Joy Macknight, Transaction Banking and Technology Editor at The Banker, and I'm here with Carole Berndt, who is Head of Global Transaction Banking at ANZ. Thank you so much for joining us today, Carole, on the second day of Sibos. What have you got in terms of feeling of what the hot topics are here at the event in Singapore?
Well, it's always great to have an opportunity to speak with you, Joy. And, day two at Sibos is interesting. First of all, you'd have to comment on the buzz in the room. It's vibrant. We're no longer talking about SEPA, and that's a great thing. We've moved on. But it is a tale of two cities here, or a little bit schizophrenic. On the floor and in the sessions, we're talking about digital disruption. We're talking about Bitcoin and blockchain, distributed ledgers. But actually, in the meeting rooms, we're talking about compliance and payment flows and technology in a more BAU sense. So I think what we're seeing is the aspiration and the reality.
All right, very interesting. And you joined ANZ earlier this year. What has your first 6 months been like, and sort of what have been your main goals?
Well, I'm delighted to be with ANZ and obviously back in Asia where I grew up and learned the business. In terms of my goals and the things I've been focused on, it's about making the bank relevant to our clients. It's about simplifying our infrastructure and making use of leveraging our capability to take our Australian clients out into the network and our network client and our Asian clients into our home markets of Australia and New Zealand.
Excellent. And you were in London for quite a number of years. So what do you think is the real difference in transaction banking between, let's say, Europe and Asia?
So it's very, very different. As you know, Europe has had a very challenging time, and I arrived at the start of the Euro crisis. The conversations was much about crisis management, falling interest rates, negative interest rates, and a very, very challenged environment. In Asia, despite talk of slowdown, it's still very buoyant. 6% growth to someone from Europe is quite an exciting paradigm. And so here in Asia, we have diversity, we have complexity, but we have a nimbleness of emerging economies and markets. And of course, growth is always a good thing.
And also, again, coming back sort of to Asia, and ANZ is definitely expanding its transaction banking footprint. What opportunities do you see for the bank in Asia?
It really is interesting as you look at the different banks and what they've been doing. And certainly the impost of the regulatory environment, cost of capital, has seen banks rationalise geographically and product-wise. And I think ANZ 8 years ago took a courageous decision to step outside of its home borders and expand into Asia. But it's been the right decision for us because Asia is core to our home markets and diversification is important. Does Asia need another Asian bank though, I guess is the question. And I would argue yes, because what we're seeing is corporates are changing buying behaviours, going back to being regional. And my one piece of advice to clients as they're thinking about buying transaction banks is, where is your bank investing their money? Is it in the countries, the geographies that are relevant to your business or will be relevant to your business?
Okay, my last question is really about the regulations and sort of the regulatory environment, and how is that impacting, the bank's business, and how can you be relevant to your clients?
It's interesting, coming from Europe, we talked a lot about regulation and how it was making life difficult and challenging and a burden. In fact, in Asia, there's always been a complexity of regulation. It's not Europe, it's not 34 countries in one group, it's multiple geographies. So banks in Asia have always been very nimble at dealing with regulatory environments. So too the corporates. But today, things are getting more complex, and the banks need to act as advisors to the corporate clients and also ensure that our investments and our technology enable us to be compliant to support our clients.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Carole, and I hope you have a really good conference.
Great, thanks Joy, always a delight.